how to influence neuroplasticity of the brain. So today the key point of the lecture is factors affecting neuroplasticity, how to enhance good plasticity and decline blood plastic changes, cognitive reserve, role of experience and environment. So neuroplasticity can result from traumatic event, stress, social interaction, meditation, as well as emotions, learning, paying attention, diet, exercise, and new experience. Brain training is very important. If we don't learn new skills, we don't engage our brain's plasticity. Highly focused activity help to keep the brain in good shape. So why not try learning new language? Whenever we learn a new language, uh, the different areas of the brain keep stimulating, and whenever we learn a new language, it doesn't stimulate the area of the language which was your native language. The new language always gets stimulated or stored in different part of the brain, so it is causing a different kind of neuroplasticity. Or whenever you try a career change, or whenever you try a job change or a profession change, this creates a lot of neuroplastic changes in the brain, and also causes your brain to get stimulated and keeps your brain engaging. Or solving logistic puzzles, um, you can use different puzzles, or nowadays there are a lot of interactive games which are available online or in your phone, which you can play and keep stimulating your neuroplasticity of brain. Or when you go to new environment, new environments always stimulate your brain's plasticity. Let us take today's example. Due to the coronavirus crisis, whole world is in lockdown. A lot of people are staying at home. Normally, we are used to go out, go to the office and work. But because of this lockdown, the complete environmental change happened. And you must have observed a lot of people are learning new skills. Like typically, all the men in the house, they started learning cooking, cleaning, or doing some new activities, painting. This is what is stimulating a new environment, causing you to learn something new. So every time whenever you change the environment, there is a need to change your learning habits or your behavioral habits and your motor habits, and all these changes will stimulate brain plasticity of the person. In general, we need to follow some of the normal principles in the normal brain of plasticity in the normal brain. We need to remember neuroplasticity is found in all nervous system, and the principles are conserved. So in all the parts of the nervous system, we see plasticity. A wide variety of experience alter the brain throughout the lifespan. The degree of plastic change is related to both relevance of an experience and intensity and frequency of event. Plastic changes are area dependent, and plastic changes are time dependent. Plastic changes are age dependent. Both prenatal and preconceptual experience can alter adult brain. Not all plasticity is good. So these are the points which we are supposed to discuss in detail in next session. Plastic changes are age dependent. The developing brain is more responsive to experience than the adult brain, but there are qualitative differences in response to similar experience at different ages. So this we have to remember that experience dependent change in a developing brain or in pediatric or small children is completely different than the experience based response in an adult. So in this, it has been found that the stress in the adult decreases spine density in the medial prefrontal cortex, but increases it in the orbital frontal cortex. In contrast, similar experiences causes opposite changes in the developing brain and normal pediatric brain. So this is what you have to remember. Usually, whatever we do exercise in a normal child, we try to apply similar type of activities or experiences in adults. And instead of helping it to cause neuroplastic changes or improvement, they are causing negative changes. So you should remember that whenever you are training an adult brain, you need to design activities based on adult people's behavior, learning, and interest. And whenever you are designing activities related to children, you need to design exercises based on their needs, their interest, and their activity. Very commonly in adult with hemiplegia, we must have seen that they are always given some pegboard activities or some toys activities or block construction activities to teach them hand training or ideal training. But this is very what is a premature activities for them being an adult. Instead of giving them this kind of activities, if you give them some adult type of activities, like for males you can give screwing or nut and bolt activities, or fitting something, opening door, or solving a problem in daily life. This kind of activities which will stimulate the adult brain and will cause a different plastic change. Instead of if you give a pegboard activity to the adult, instead of helping to improve the hand and neuroplastic changes, it will cause shrinkage of the activities. This probably because it is not relevant to the person, and very soon these adults will lose interest in that activity. So instead of helping the person to gain from the training, it will cause negative impact in the neuroplasticity. Also remember, both prenatal, preconceptual experience can alter the adult brain. Although the brain continues to develop long after the birth, it has become clear in the last decade that the prenatal and preconceptual experiences can profoundly alter the adult brain. So what is happened to the children prenatally or preconceptually also is going to affect his ability to learn, ability to develop neuroplastic changes. So before the birth, what kind of exposure the mother is being put through, or what is her emotional status, what is her functional status, what is her beliefs, probably that can affect the children's ability to learn new experiences and causing neuroplastic changes. That is why you must have seen that there are a lot of classes are going around, which is called as prenatal behavioral classes or parental training classes, which occurs before the delivery. And these trainings and these experiences in later life of the children are helping in learning new skills faster, or improving their ability to cause neuroplastic changes, which will help them in gaining new skills, new learnings. And maybe if they get some kind of insult or neurological injury later stages, it might prepare the brain for better recovery. So parental experiences could influence epigenetics and subsequent health in the offspring. It is only recently that the experience of the parent has been shown to affect the epigenetic of the brain in the offspring. Brain development is influenced not only by the postnatal experiences, but also influenced by the earlier maternal or parental experiences, which combine to produce various phenotype and individual differences that were perceived in closely related individuals. Once again, such differences are likely to influence how the brain responds to the injury and rehabilitation much later in life. Like similarly, if the same parent has two kids, and first kid during the first pregnancy, the mother has gone through lot of emotional changes or disturbances, and the second child got a good exposure. During the second child, she got a good exposure and she was able to maintain her emotional and psychological well-being. Post delivery, both the children have little bit differences in their individual experiences and learning. So this is how can we explain that how the prenatal experiences can affect the postnatal neuroplastic changes occurring in the brain. Next part is degree of plastic changes is related to both the relevance of an experience and the intensity or the frequency of the event. So as I explained in the previous slide, that if your exercises or activities are not relevant to the person, and that experience is not relevant, it is not going to help to cause any neuroplastic changes. So before you design exercise program, please understand his personality, take his history into account, what are his liking, what is the way of his talking, how does he likes to be facilitated, is he an optimistic or pessimistic person, is he open for suggestion, does he like appreciation, does he like criticism. Based on that, we can design the program which will be relevant to that person, the previous experience which he used to like or the activities he used to like. If you include that activity in the therapy, and if they are more relevant to the person, then he might participate well and help in causing more neuroplastic changes. Or you can ask the person directly what is their interest, what is the activity they want to work on, or the any specific hobby, like somebody want to dance. So I suggest you design exercises or activities which are related to dance. Somebody likes car, so you should design related activities which is around car, like maybe it not be driving the car, just cleaning the car, opening the door, or putting something into the car, putting a bag into the dicky of the car. All these small things will be more relevant to that person instead of doing a pegboard exercises on the table. So please remember this, the relevance of the experience is very important to cause the degree of plastic changes. Second is the intensity or the frequency. If your intensity is not good enough and the frequency is not good enough, whatever you are training, there has to be more intense activity to cause the plastic changes. Like similarly, practicing for 1 time or 10 time or 20 time may not be enough. You might need to practice for more repetition, maybe say 50, 100, 200. There is no right kind of repetition or intensity or load. It is always based on what is his capacity, what is his tolerance, and are you actually pushing his boundaries to work on that. That is the best kind of intensity. Also frequency. If you are taking therapy once a week only, or after 15 days, probably it might not causes changes. So the frequency is also very important. Like most of the European countries or American countries, the frequency is very less. They sometimes call the patient only once a week or after 15 days. But if you don't do the frequent practice of the activity, it might not cause the plastic changes. That does not mean that the patient has to come to the physiotherapist or to the OPD. Even if you don't call him on OPD basis, but if he is practicing that activity as at home on his own, that will still help in causing plastic changes. But to do that, how you will make sure that he will practice that activity at home is based on the relevance. If the relevance is good, and if the person likes that relevance of the activity, he will be motivated to practice that activity at home as well. A wide variety of experience alter the brain throughout the lifespan. So virtually any experience can change the brain, especially if there is an associated behavioral change. If it is relevant, if the person will like, and if he is appreciated more frequently, there is high chances that he will repeat that and it will become a behavioral change. So make sure that all the experiences which are more repeated, more liked, or more appreciated probably will cause more behavioral changes. So whenever we are teaching them, we should focus on this point. So we learn, remember, and create new thoughts and behavior change throughout our lifetime. Changing behavior requires change in neural circuit that underlines it. So whenever there is a significant behavioral change, there is change in neural circuits. So what are the factors affecting the synaptic organization of the normal brain? So here you can see that what is the sensory motor experience the person is getting. So here look at both sensory and motor experiences is very important, and both the sensory and motor experience should be connected to each other to cause a more long lasting changes. Like I say this quote, Any non-specific sensory stimuli is useless stimuli. Like if you are doing a simple stroking exercise on the hand without any relevance, it just you are stroking frequently on the hand, and it doesn't have any related motor experience. There is no related motor activity. It is non-specific sensory stimuli like compression, non-specific compression in the hand or shoulder, or weight bearing on the hand. Non-specifically doesn't cause any changes. So the sensory motor experiences should be relevant to each other. So if you are giving experience of weight bearing and he's trying to reach for some purposeful activities, he will get a sensory experience of sensation through the hand, compression, weight bearing, touch to the skin, what is his alignment of different joint position in the position, and what are the motor muscles, motor activities happening, what are the muscles are activating, which muscles fundal are stimulated during that activity. All these experiences are interrelated and they will help in causing neuroplasticity. So if we influence these sensory motor experiences, we will able to generate more neuroplastic changes. So that is why most of the neurophysiological approaches always try to teach you that you should work in functional position. Not only do the functional position, do also more functional activities. And when I'm saying functional activity, don't mimic the activity, just do the activity. Like sometimes we tell the person to reach out to the hand, but why should he reach out the hand? Give him an object like a bottle to pick up, or a pen to pick up, something which has to be there to pick him. Then it will become more relevant. Then task learning. In the similar thing, if there is no task, there is no target, what he is supposed to do? Touching is a different task, whereas picking is different task. Throwing is different task. So based on what kind of task you are giving is going to cause a different sensory motor experience and will going to cause a different neuroplastic changes. Hormonal changes is going to influence the person's neuroplasticity. Psychosomatic drugs also has an effect on neuroplastic changes. Neurotropic factors also causes changes. Natural rewards, social interaction, physical activities also is going to influence occurrence of any neuroplastic changes. We already discussed about the prenatal experiences. Social play, what is his role in active society? What role he is he a father in the house? Is he active participant in the society? Is he contributing to the society? What is his existence in the society? All this is going to affect his ability to learn and form a new neuroplastic changes. Aging is going to affect the neuroplastic changes. Stress can cause depression or a decrease in the neuroplastic changes. Anti-inflammatory inflammatories also are going to alter the occurrence of the neuroplastic changes. Diet is very important to facilitate electrical stimulation. Like in some cases, they have tried increasing response of epilepsy by doing kindling. So in that, they found more neuroplastic changes. Or there are some synaptic modifications can be done by long-term potentiation or long-term depression with help of electrical stimulation, or surface cortical stimulation also help in causing some neuroplastic changes in the brain. So we can use these factors whenever we are looking at planning or exercise designing of a patient, and in combination of these can be done with each other to cause better learning. Experience dependent changes interact. We have experience of experiences beginning in the utero and continue throughout the life. Effect of these experience accumulate and process referred to as metaplasticity. So whenever we get experience, they get intermingled and get accumulated with each other, and this added plastic changes is called as metaplasticity. Metaplasticity reflects changes in the biochemical, physiological, morphological state of neurons and synapse that altered their subsequent ability to change the state. So this metaplasticity, multiple plastic changes happening at multiple level, is metaplasticity is very important in a developing brain as well as adult brain. Little known about this interaction, but if we are able to understand why brain injuries patient respond differently to treatment, we need to recognize these people have different histories, including drug histories. So because these biophysiological, mechanical and morphological changes are happening at a time. Example, a person with spasticity, like he's got a spasticity and tightness in his plantar flexors, which is a morphological mechanical change which is affecting its tightness or the ability to move the ankle freely. This change will cause changes in knee, which might cause hyperextension. And because if he is learning with this mechanical changes, he will have a different biomechanical model, and this biomechanical model will cause different biochemical stimulation, and this biochemical stimulation will cause different physiological activities, and an abnormal motor behavior might be elicited. So it is not only when you keep repeating the behavior, it is only chemical changes are happening or physiological happening or morphological happening. All they are occurring together. So whenever you are planning, you need to look at all these three, how they are interacting with each other. Also, we need to recognize their different histories. Of what is their history? Like if he's suppose from childhood or he's used to do bodybuilding or exercise, so his ability to adapt to high intensive training will be much different than somebody who is sedentary and not able to do it. Or somebody has a high flexibility will have a different ability to accommodability, or his personalities, what is his drug histories. Some drugs can facilitate neuroplasticity, some drug will obliterate neuroplasticity for long term, not only during drug consumption, but the drugs can have long lasting effect on the neuroplasticity. So we have to take these histories also into consideration. So the metaplasticity, the idea of metaplasticity is likely related to the concept of cognitive reserve. What is cognitive reserve? Which refers to the differences in cognitive capacity in older people related to lifetime intellectual activities. So if you look at everybody, especially this is found in older population, they have a high cognitive reserve. So the people who were previously exposed to high intensive training, high cognitive training, more challenges, they have more cognitive reserve, and these high cognitive reserves affects their aging, their ability to learn in the later stage of life, their ability to respond to injury, stroke, aging related disorders, or the brain disorders such as Alzheimer's. All this can be changed if they have a good cognitive reserve. So extensive people who have got extensive participation in leisure activity in older people is associated with reduced risk of dementia. So the people who were very active in their previous life, they have a lesser chances of dementia or to be delayed dementia. So what is the hypothesis here? The hypothesis is that cognitive reserves stemming from previous learning experience play a protective role in coping with neurodegenerative diseases. So this cognitive reserve will act as a protective agent for neurodegenerative diseases which occur in later stages of life. The idea can be extended to hypothesize that cognitive reserve might also have the benefit of enhancing the efficacy of rehabilitative strategy after brain injury, which would be an example of metaplasticity. So if somebody has a good cognitive reserves before the injury, he will have a good response in rehabilitative strategies due to the help of metaplasticity. Or even if he may not exposed to the previously to good cognitive reserve, but post injury, post brain injury, early periods of training, if we design good activities which will stimulate his good cognitive reserve, for next 2 to 3 years he will have better metaplasticity and probably will respond to the rehabilitative strategy better than people who have a poor cognitive reserve. So how to influence this cognitive reserve? Cognitive reserve is thought to play a significant role in development and clinical course of chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So people with chronic traumatic encephalopathy can be treated or showed good improvement with cognitive reserve. In other neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, cognitive reserve is considered to be protective agent against clinical manifestation, and it is suggested that one can increase one's reserve and relative resistance with occupational and educational attainment. So the more the person is involved in his a previous occupational or educational attainment, if you teach him more frequently, is involving new learning, new education, this will help in improvement in cognitive chronic traumatic encephalopathy as well as Alzheimer's disease. So in diseases such as Alzheimer's disease and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, cognitive reserves provides an explanation for individuals with different measures of cognitive deficit despite similar degree of neuropathology. So even if you have a similar injury, neuropathology is similar, but few people show different response to the treatment and develop differently because they have different cognitive reserve. So how do we influence this cognitive reserve? There are positive factors as well as negative factors. So a mental stimulation, activities which causes mental stimulation is going to have a good response on cognitive reserve. Active lifestyle, social stimulation, the more the person is involved in social activity, you will have good cognitive reserve. But you might have seen that a lot of patients with neurological injury, they isolate themselves from the society. They are always bound to the house, or they go only in their society, which is very closed area. Instead of that, going socially out to watch movies or going for shopping or going to meet friends or going to social gatherings is going to have a better cognitive reserve. So that is why you must insist. It doesn't matter are they able to walk or not, or are they able to mobile or not. To improve their cognitive reserve, you should stimulate social activities. Cognitive remediation. The more you do cognitive remediation, it will enhance your ability to stimulate your brain. It will improve your learning and it will improve your neuroplasticity as well as physical activity. A sedentary lifestyle is going to drastically affect the cognitive reserve. The more you are physically active in most of the activities, your cognitive reserve is better. And you must have seen that most of our patients, because of their poor physical ability, the participation in physical activities goes down, and probably because of that, their cognitive reserve goes down, and that indirectly affects their neuroplasticity. Similarly, negative factors also can affect the cognitive reserve. A poor education, if you do not educate the person about the disease, about his health, about his problem, or his previous education, his learning habits, is going to affect his cognitive reserve. Mood disturbances, if there is a continuous mood swings which is happening and he is emotionally disturbed, it is going to reduce his cognitive reserve and it will reduce his ability to produce neuroplasticity. Poor nutrition, if the person is not fed properly with good nutrition, take a good advice from nutritionist and plan the good nutrition, it might help in his cognitive reserve. Alcohol or drug abuse, severe alcohol and drug abuse causes deterioration in cognitive reserve and neuroplastic changes. And poor health, if he's frequently suffering from multiple diseases or complex diseases or systemic failures are happening along with the neurological diseases, it will affect his cognitive reserve. You must have seen in Parkinson's patient, along with their physical disability, they also have respiratory complication, other health problem, urinary problem, and all this combination of factors affects their learning, affects their memory, affects their mobility, and slowly they get isolated from the society, and everything causes deterioration in his cognitive reserve and ability to produce neuroplastic changes and ability to learn new movement, new behavior. And then we complain that Parkinson's disease is not changing. The problem is not Parkinson, the problem is associated changes, all these factors which might be related for poor cognitive reserve and poor cognitive, poor neuroplasticity. So all these good positive neuroplasticity and negative neuroplasticity will affect the cognitive ability, and the more you improve his cognitive ability, his everyday functioning will be automatically improves. So keep doing mental stimulation, intellectual pursuit, social interaction, good emotional health, physical exercise, proper nutrition, proper sleep. Sleep is also very important. We'll discuss that in later slides. Cognitive remediation therapy. So if this keeps on increasing, it will improve more cognitive abilities and better functioning. So as a rehabilitation specialist, what are we expecting at the end? We want more everyday functioning. And if we keep working around these parameters along with our therapeutic activities or rehabilitation training, we will get a better functioning. So also, please remember the impact of employment on cognition and cognitive reserve, implication across disease and aging. So as the people were having good employment, they had a good cognition and good cognitive reserve, because a less interest or low arousal attention will cause low stress, and it will have a poor environmental changes, and then it will affect the learning and neuroplasticity and cognitive reserve. That is why you must have seen that when our parents or seniors, whenever they were in the job, they were high functioning, their cognitive abilities was good, their memory was good, their problem solving was good. But the moment they get retired, suddenly their functioning deteriorates faster, their cognitive abilities goes down, memory goes down, learning goes down, performance goes down, physical activities goes down. So that is because the employment was affecting on their cognition and cognitive reserve, and indirectly causing faster aging and faster diseases. When they were on the job, even the other diseases were not very much common, but the moment they get retired after 60s, all the diseases and aging becomes very faster, and our patients' performance deteriorates very faster. So it is insisted that if they get retired from one job, make sure that they get engaged in another job. If not the job, some language training or some new environment. You must have seen in Bollywood, whenever they get retired, they always go from a city, like suppose Mumbai, they go in a hill station area or some village area. But there is a logic behind it, because the moment they go in a new environment, new activities, the brain has to learn different stimuli. They have to cope with new environment. All these changes causes neuroplastic changes, and the people who change their environment in their aging shows slowed aging, delayed aging, or delayed dementia, less diseases compared to the people who are bound in the home and always kept in the house because of any reason. So the interaction of employment and disease on cognitive reserve. So employment benefits. Employment results in several benefits that can directly, indirectly affect the brain health, such as employment always helps in learning new skill, social engagement, establishment of routine and structured routine. There is always a purpose and meaning. Every day they have to get out of the house, go to the office, finish their job. So there is a meaning and there is a purpose for the day. And there is a meaning also. So like suppose I am a teacher, my meaning, I am a teacher, there is a meaning for me in the life. But when you get retired, suddenly there is no meaning, there is no purpose in life, and the cognitive reserve goes down. And there is always an income. You only do activities when you get paid for it. The payment can be in terms of salary, in terms of appreciation, in terms of engagement, but there is always some kind of income which is coming, and appreciation is coming. Such as diseases, reduction or cessation of employment can interfere with the positive neuroplastic benefit of the employment. Emotional distress of the disease can interfere with the cognition. Treatment for some diseases may interfere with cognition, such as brain, which affects the brain's ability of neuroplasticity. Systemically, diseases can compromise physical health. Now, all these factors, which is negative factors, will affect the brain's health and causes deterioration in cognitive health, and obviously will indirectly cause poor neuroplastic changes in the brain. So there is also a relation of sleep and cognition on everyday functioning in older adults. So here you can see that whenever there is a good sleep, good functioning of the activity happens. Whenever there is good cognitive abilities, everyday functioning is better. The moment there is a poor cognitive activities, it causes faster aging. Or if there is less sleep, which usually commonly happens in the aged people, which also causes faster aging. So this cycles keeps on repeating. So if we engage them in good physical activity, good cognitive activity, and if they get a good sound sleep, they will have good everyday functioning. So how do we harness the plasticity of plasticity for the neuro rehabilitation? So studies of neuroplasticity on normal animals provide a launch pad to develop new strategies for designing new rehabilitation program. So there are a lot of animal studies been done with different experiences, different exposure, and these principles can be applied in humans also. Our basic assumption is that experiences that can change the normal brain will likely produce similar, hopefully even larger changes in the injured brain. But this is not often the cause that always happens. So it does not mean the way the normal brain responds to stimulus and experience and the neuroplasticity which occurs in normal brain will not be same in the injured brain. So there might be some variation in the neuroplastic changes which are occurring in the injured brain. So we need to take this point also into account, and we need to study that more and take into consideration whenever you are planning a therapy for injured brain. So whenever you do a mental activity, there is a creation of new neural structure, and then there is a repetition, and then they get strengthened, and this gets more plastic changes, and they keep repeated again and again, and this repetition becomes a neuroplastic change. So experience dependent plasticity, how does it occur? So here you can see that there was two synapses previously occurring, and there is a new axon which causes new experience, and new experience causes new learning. A prolonged experience on training, like suppose whenever you give a new experience like such as training, treadmill training, walking, or anything you are planning, if you keep repeating for a long time, there is a training effect happens, and there is new synaptic changes which are occurring here. And even if the experience is removed, even if the training is removed, these neuroplastic changes, they remain. And if you repeat that experience again, they become more stronger. So this neuroplastic changes or experience dependent plasticity will cause long lasting changes, and if you give repeated exposure, repeated experience again, it will become more stronger. So these are the experiments which are done on animals. These are the different environment or complex challenges they are given, and based on their complex challenges, they found how the neuroplastic changes are occurring in their brain. And these animal studies then were done on clinical trials in humans, and they found better improvement due to a good enriched environment. So understand environment enrichment is very important. So there is a good interaction of environment press on positive and negative neuroplasticity. So here you can see that the more the complex environment is there, there is a good neuroplasticity. Less the complex environment, less is the neuroplasticity. Let us take an example of the London taxi driver. A London taxi driver doesn't get licensed directly by just showing how to do the driving skill. The London taxi driver has to go through all the roads of the London and remember and analyze the roads. Then only they get the license, and because of that, their brain gets some more neuroplastic changes compared to other persons who are not being challenged so much. So these changes will help in causing more neuroplastic changes. Like the people who are doing complex juggling or complex activity gets more neuroplastic changes compared to those who are not engaged in more complex activity. So no engagement will have a poor training and poor functioning. So you should always remember that the more you get new complex activity or a more enriched environment or a variable environment, novel environment, all these will have a different neuroplastic changes than a routine environment. So effect of enriched environment. So the effect happens is there is increase spatial learning, there is a special increase in spatial memory, increase in working memory. There is depression of depression like behavior is decreased, and there is improved motor learning is being seen. And how does this neuroplastic changes occur due to enriched environment? One, there is decrease in lesion volume, there is increased dendritic remodeling, increased synaptogenesis, increased axonal remodeling, decreased white matter damage, increasing antioxidant activities, increase in angiogenesis, and there is decrease in leakage of blood-brain barriers. There is increased neurogenesis, there is increase in growth promoting factor, and there is decrease in growth inhibiting factor. So all these changes occurs due to good enriched environment, and the more you create enriched environment, you will able to produce more neuroplastic changes. This is the diagram which explains the importance of exposure. Here you can see that the running has a good influence on the proliferation. Learning has a good influence on proliferation, differences, and survival. So depend on each time when you expose, what kind of exposure or what kind of experience you are giving to the person will have different types of neuroplastic changes, and some thing will also help in maintaining the survival of the neuroplastic changes. As we studied previously also, not all plasticity is good. Most studies of brain plasticity and behavior emphasize that the idea that plastic changes can support improved cognitive and motor function. But plastic changes are not all good and can interfere with behavior. So one of the example of pathological plasticity, including dementia, epilepsy, and pathological pain such as phantom pain. Sometimes focal hand dystonia can be explained by the abnormal neuroplasticity. Focal hand dystonia refers to the abnormal finger and hand position, cramp, and difficulty in coordinating hand and finger movements. Although the precise cause of dystonia is still debated, one of the hypotheses is that it results from extensive practice of the more intensely used hand, which likely results from distortion of the somatosensory and motor map in the cortex. So the somatosensory and motor maps get distorted and may cause typical dystonic changes or abnormal or asymmetrical distribution of tone in the patient with dystonia, especially in the hand. Another hypothesis is that the practice led to an abnormal activation pattern in the premotor cortex, which in turn could be related to abnormal cortical map in either event or the dystonia symptoms appear to result of pathological plasticity. So because of repetitive practice of abnormal pattern behavior, this causes abnormal activation of patterns, and it will cause abnormal cortical mapping and abnormal neuroplasticity. So this is also one of the hypotheses to explain a bad neuroplasticity. But the brain has a delete button, and here how to use it effectively. So we can use a constraint and immersion phenomena. Neuroplasticity and specifically rewiring occurs through some struggle, and where the weaker circuit in the brain must be used instead of stronger one. So anything which is not repeatedly used will become weak, and anything which has been used frequently will become stronger. So you need to constrain occurrence of abnormal behavior, and that constraint will make weak connection, and it will help to unlearn the abnormal behavior. This means that to create a new circuit is to immerse yourself in new and unfamiliar cognitive pattern. So you need to create a different new and unfamiliar pattern which the person is not used to do, and this can help in changing the previous abnormal behavior. This can be explained by the habits and triggers. What are our abnormal habits which are there from previous learning experience can be changed. To stimulate any habit, there are environmental trigger, there are social trigger, and there are emotional triggers. You may not able to change the triggers, but you can change the influence of the trigger or the interpretation of the trigger or experience of the trigger, and you can change the result which is occurring as a result of the trigger. And the more you keep doing that, that will help in changing the previous habits and abnormal motor behavior. So reprogram your mind to accept new beliefs. So what I gave out in the form of word will return to me as experience. So what kind of words you are using is very important while you are treating the patient. Also, what the person believes, what works, what doesn't work is also very important, and that will be written as an experience. So you need to be very cautious when you are interacting with the patient, whenever you are saying some treatment works or doesn't work. Based on your words and based on his experience, based on his belief, is going to change. So as a common rehabilitation beliefs that you need to believe that rehabilitation works, therapy works, treatment works, motivation works, experience works, repetition works, your exposure works, environment works. Based on this belief, there is a higher chances of neuroplastic changes, and you can influence the neuroplasticity directly or indirectly. So it is the time for the change to our brain as well as our patient brain, and neuroplasticity will help us to change. So rewire your brain for success. Make sure that you always focus on getting success. You will focus on knowledge of result more than the knowledge of performance. The more you give knowledge of result of success, the patient will repeat the behavior. And if you give more knowledge of failure, the person is likely to not to repeat the behavior. So stimulating your brain to enhance stroke recovery is very important. So stimulate your own brain as a therapist, as well as you can stimulate the brain of your patient to enhance the recovery. So thank you very much. This is the end of the today's session. Next topic, we'll learn about how to apply these concepts into clinical application, and how do we use neuroplasticity for rehabilitation. What are the neuroplastic changes occur in the injured brain, and how the injured brain reacts to this stimulus, rehabilitation, experience, and environment. So if you like these videos, please click on the subscribe button, and whenever there is a new video uploaded, you will get further notification. All these neuro rehabilitation videos are always been published on YouTube live on every Thursdays around 9:30 p.m. So I am done with the session. Manasa. Okay.
Wow, sir, thank you for that lecture. It was really insightful. And I learned so many new things about the number of factors that can influence neuroplasticity, and that concept of emotion and constraint was really very beautiful. So I think we can go ahead with the questions now. We have some questions in the live chat. The first question is, what is meant by intellectual pursuit?
I'm not very sure about your question. What is intellectual pursuit? I need to study it, because both word are itself is very challenging. Maybe I may not give a right justice to your question this time. I will go back and study about your question, and I will answer that question in the comment section.
So there is another question by Dr. Priyanka Khatri. She is asking how much repetition of exercise is needed to improve neuroplasticity and cortical change in brain. Does it vary in every condition?
Okay. Research showed that in normal brain, to cause a learning a new behavior, you require minimum 10,000 repetitions of that activity to cause a normal brain change. And this might be required more in injured brain, and yes, it might changes with different conditions or different diseases, because whenever you are learning any new behavior, there are multiple interactions of synaptic connection is happening, and if that synaptic connections are not happening in the expected ways, the brain has to form a new synaptic connection, and probably require more repetition. In a simple way, usually we do very less repetition, and probably because of less repetition, we are unable to produce lot of neuroplastic changes, and then we blame the disease that stroke doesn't improve or upper limb doesn't improve. My assumption is that maybe I'm wrong, but this is my hypothesis that most of the patients upper limb doesn't improve because we do not design exercise which require maximum repetition in upper limb throughout the day. Whereas lower limb, they show better improvement compared to upper limb, because not only they get more repetition of activity during the therapy, but we require lower limb for all day-to-day activities, walking, moving from one place to another, and that gives more opportunity to practice for lower limb, more repetition. Compared to that, probably we are not able to give so many repetition to the upper limb. Along with the complexity of the upper limb, also this is one of the factor. So if we take one factor out and we design activities, we create a good enriched environment which provides more involvement of the upper limb in day-to-day activity, probably will able to produce better changes than the people who are not engaged the upper limb in throughout the day and given less repetition.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The next question is by Ms. Gauri Pandit. She is asking, treating dementia patient, what needs to be done to improve day-to-day memory?
See, the day-to-day memory depends on what are you memorizing. Always remember the specificity principle. In next lecture, we are going to discuss different neuroplasticity principle which you can use to cause a specific change. But one of the specificity principle says depends on what you want to memorize them. You want to memorize names. You want to memorize countries. You memorize them mathematical solutions. So depends on you can create more the memory. But there are two things. Dementia is basically the person start losing day-to-day memories also or day-to-day activities also. But if he is more active, more participative, involved in more cognitive learning, involved in more puzzles, instead of reading to the newspaper and reading or watching news, and if he's engaged in day-to-day activities, is going out in society or just going and buying groceries from the market, will also cause good cognitive reserves, and all these changes will help in reducing the dementia and improving the memory of the patient in day-to-day activities as well.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to the next question. This question is asked by Dr. Natasha. She's asking, does neuroplasticity differ with tone? Is it that in pediatrics, the hypotonic child develops neuroplasticity slower?
Okay, there are two questions. First question is does neuroplasticity gets affected by tone? So always remember to the first concept, metaplasticity. So whenever you are causing neuroplasticity, there are metaplastic changes occurring at the physiological, biomechanical, and chemical level. So if the biomechanical movement or restriction due to tone is affecting the posture and abnormal rotation or abnormal position, will affect the learning and will affect the neuroplasticity. That is why in the previous cases, sometimes they focuses on changing the tone. Instead of changing the tone, if you change the alignment in a normal posture, and if you keep repeating normal posture, in spite of having abnormal tone, you will get good neuroplastic changes. Tone is not going to affect directly, but the interaction of tone with body alignment, posture, and movement will going to affect the neuroplasticity. If you change the body alignment setup and interaction of the different body positions with the task, you will get a better neuroplasticity, and tone might not affect so much directly. And second part, in pediatric, you said hypotonia, again, as I said, hypotonia doesn't give more stability in the trunk, more stability in the lower limb, like standing, sitting, moving from one place to another get affected. And remember, all early sensory motor behaviors are very much important, because hypotonic people are most of the time they are lying down in supine, looking at the ceiling, so they don't get a lot of sensory inputs, because only sensory input they are getting visually is the ceiling, and they are not moving around, so the somatosensory inputs are also not happening throughout the body, and all these reduced sensory motor experiences is going to affect the neuroplasticity, as we discussed in the factor affecting neuroplasticity. So even if they don't have a good tone, what you can do, you can create some devices or some instrument which will make them move from one place to another, like you can use a patla, the person can sleep on that and then he is moving on that, or you can make a good sitting posture wheelchair which allow them to move around, or give some different exposure, like ball pools are very good. Aquatic is very good because it allows the person to move in the water and gets good sensory motor behavior, or play activity which involves the person to get engaged into that activity will have a different experience compared to the previous experience which were due to hypotonia. So again, I want to emphasize, it was not tone which is causing delayed neuroplasticity. It is the exposure, or it is the mobility reduced due to hypotonia, which is causing less neuroplasticity. So tone is not your problem, experience is your problem.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next question is, how does constraint induced therapy cause neuroplastic change? By Dr. Dipanjali Jadhav.
I think constant induced therapy has very well explained in literature very frequently. I will explain this short. Basically, the assumption is that an adult brain, a hemiplegic with adult brain, whenever he has a weakness in the affected hand, he tend to not to use and use the unaffected arm more frequently, because unaffected arm is moving very easily. So it is called as learned non-use phenomena. So the author says it is not neurological problem, it is a behavioral problem. The person is not learning or not using behaviorally the affected arm. So you need to cause a behavioral change. Like I said in the constant and immersion slide, if you want to cause a behavioral change, you have to force the person to that behavior. So that is why they constrain the unaffected hand. So they are forced to use the affected arm. So when the unaffected arm is constrained, forced to use the affected arm, and this concept is called as forced use therapy. But that is not constraint induced therapy. A constraint induced therapy is like you constrain, and along with that you need to engage the affected arm in real life activities and functional activities, minimum about 6 to 8 hours, and up to 90% of wakeful hours. Then it causes new changes in the affected arm. So this is the concept where we reverse the behavioral change of learn not use. We force them to use the affected arm, and the more they use the affected arm, it shows good neuroplastic changes in the brain, and the person will improve.
Wow, sir, I think your lecture was very interesting today. We have many questions lined up for you. The next question is, how does depression and stress affect neuroplasticity?
How does depression?
And stress affect neuroplasticity?
Okay, depression and stress causes negative chemical changes in the brain, and it causes or it is called as growth inhibitor, or a neuroplastic inhibitor, which causes poor synaptic activation, and then poor learning. Like similarly, this can be explained by the chemical changes due to alcohol. Whenever a person with alcohol, whenever you teach him new behavior or new activity, he shows poor performance, because the synaptic connection which are occurring at the synaptic junction, NM junction, doesn't occur more frequently, or there is a poor performance, and that is how it causes poor performance in the motor behavior. Similarly, this depression and stress causes chemical changes at the synaptic junction, neuromuscular junction, and then poor performance. And this can be enhanced other way around also. There are some drugs which improves the performance, which causes improve synaptic connection, and improve NM junction activities, and improve neuroplasticity. Dopamine has found to be very effective. And how do you release dopamine? Release of dopamine is very simple. Whenever you get happy, or whenever you get result better, dopamine is released. And you guys are daily doing small doses of dopamine. So whenever you put something on Facebook, on WhatsApp, and whenever you get a likes and somebody appreciates, dopamine get released, and you feel better, and you start appreciating that, oh, I'm learning better, I'm doing better. This is a small dose of dopamine. And if you want a bigger dose of dopamine, do a bigger task, get a bigger appreciation and a bigger response, you will get a bigger dose of dopamine. Like the way I'm conducting this session, you guys are asking so many questions, I am getting a bigger dose of dopamine, and probably because of this session, I am learning more than you what you are learning. Probably if you are learning one time, probably I will learn 2 to 10 times more than you. And this is how it is helping my neuroplasticity of the brain.
Thank you, sir. Next question is, what is the difference between neuroplasticity in adult and pediatric population?
Both are neuroplastic. As I said in the previous lectures also, neuroplasticity in children is better, faster, but there are different neuroplastic changes in adult as well as the pediatric. Like if some experience causes some neuroplasticity one part of the brain, similar experience will have different response in adult. So do not use similar type of experiences, similar type of environment for adult and pediatric. You need to understand the person, his needs, his movement behavior, his interest, his capabilities, being age appropriate, and accordingly you design the exercise program. So both have a different response to experience and treatment and rehabilitation. So don't design same thing, same environment for both the population. Many times I have seen that some rehabilitation center has the same setup for adults and pediatric, and they use same equipment for adult and pediatrics and same exercise for adult and pediatrics, and sometimes it doesn't show the expected changes because both behaves differently to the same experience. So this point to be noted. Try to create different environment, different structure, different setup, and you will see a different neuroplastic changes in them.
Okay, so sir, related to this, I also have one question which I would like to ask you. In pediatric population, normally we say that they haven't had any experience of these activities before, and they have to learn it as a completely new activity. Whereas in adult, like post and adult brain injury, they are relearning activities. So, is there any difference in the neuroplasticity that is happening?
Both has advantage and disadvantage depending on what are you teaching. So let me explain first with the pediatric population. What is the advantage in pediatric population? Because there are no engrams, there are no maps, there are no allocation of motor action and function in their brain. So what are the exposure, what are you train the brain will get aligned, organized, and there will be a particular reorganization based on your training, and it will help in good neuroplastic changes. Only thing that because it is a new experience, new environment, new training, it will take more time, more repetition, and more frequency of training compared to adults to teach the same behavior. That is why in pediatric we need to give them therapy from the infancy to up to 6 to 12 years of the age till they become more competent in their function. That is why most of the cerebral palsy therapy they keep doing for 6 to 12 hours minimum. After that they give up. Compared to the adult, although adult because they have already engrams, motor programs are there, they have a previous experience. This is good and bad. First let me tell you why it is bad. Because if you are teaching him something new, you have to unlearn what is previously been learned and learn something new. So you have to do two processes at a time, unlearning and learning, and both the thing doesn't happen at the same time. You have to unlearn and then teach learn, and there has to be slow gradual overlap between unlearning and learning. Most commonly what we do unlearning and learning at the same time, and there is a confusion, and the patient doesn't know what to learn and what to not learn, and the progress might get delayed. What is good point in that? The problem with most of us, whenever we design the program, we design exercise program in adult, which is very new, like such as adult. We design exercise program in sitting or supine. We are teaching them to do SLR, hypnoflexion in supine, or some exercise in supine sideline, and we never do that exercises like that in that particular position. Instead of that, if you design activities which are more real life situation like sitting, standing, and walking, or some standing posture related activity which are more relevant to them, and it is not now for them to unlearn and learn because it was already there. They have to just rebuild the previous activity and keep doing the same thing. Like giving a pegboard activity to adult don't do a pegboard activity, adult don't do interlocking of the blocks. Instead of that, if you give an adult who is being used to do the motor engineering activity, give them motor engineering activity. If he's a painter, give them painting activity. If he's a sweeper, give them sweeping type of activities. So if you develop on the previous activity, previous history, previous experience, it will not fight your neuroplasticity. It will enhance the neuroplasticity. So it is not the brain's problem, it is the therapist's problem. In adult, most of the time they come late to us, like a chronic hemiplegic. No, because everybody want to move, everybody want to walk, everybody want to mobile. So they learn some abnormal motor behavior based on what is the sensory motor they experience they have, based on what are the motor control they have. and they learn a abnormal behavior such as we call the circumduction gait. In that case, we have to unlearn the circumduction gait and teach a normal gait. In that also we do the common mistake again. Always remember again and again and again and again. Gait is not a cognitive behavior. Gait is a subcortical activity. By teaching the person to do cognitive walking of gait, like doing heel strike, hip knee flexion, cognitively you are causing a different neuroplastic changes which were not there. None of us, like a normal child, never cognitively design. Oh, I am supposed to walk. I am supposed to do the hip knee flexion. I am supposed to do the heel strike. We never ever do. But what does the therapist does? He teaches him heel strike. He teaches him control knee flexion, control knee extension. Don't buckle during the mid stance. All these are new experiences, or these are new learning. So it is not emphasizing on the previous experience. You are creating new experience. So you have to unlearn and then learn something. And because you are not unlearning anything and you are causing learning of a new behavior, you are fighting with your own neuroplasticity. So my suggestion is very simple. Normally people want to design new exercises, something out of the blue moon, new equipment, new instrument, new exercise. Believe me, if you see my exercise program, you will see I do very stupid exercises which are very real life activities, daily life, and you don't see anything novel or very different. But the more you are close to real life exercises, real life activity, it will not be fighting with the neuroplastic changes, and it will create long lasting changes.
So thank you for that wonderful answer, and that was gave me a new perspective towards my treatment now. There are a few more questions which I'll just go ahead with. How to ensure biomechanically correct repetition of functional activities by patient at home without trick movements?
Okay, I will give a short answer, and next lecture we'll be focusing more on this. Like biomechanically, did you say splint? How
Sir,
to carry?
he's asking, she's asking.
I can read here. How to ensure biomechanically correct repetition of functional activities by a patient at home without trick movement. Okay, so this is based on how do you give a setup, what kind of exercise design you are designing. I explained in the previous lecture also, walking, circumduction gait. The setup is that walk more closer to the wall so that the leg doesn't go in more circumduction gait. So at home also he can do. Wall is always there at home as well as therapeutic setting. So do not design exercises which cannot be done at exercise which cannot be done at home. So the more you use real life equipment, day-to-day activities, like I use door, I use chair, I use table, I use shoes, I use a rod in the home, anything like that. Whenever I go for home visit, I do not search for any high fancy equipment. Whatever is available there, I use that. I use dupatta, I use the edge of the bed, I use pillow. Like one time I was treating a para to walk, and we did not have parallel bar at home. So what I did, I kept multiple chair in line, and the back support of the chair was used as a parallel bar, and people were sitting by the side, and it created a parallel bar, or a railing is a parallel bar. So like that, you need to design exercises for home which are very very realistic. That doesn't mean that all your exercise in therapeutic has to be like that. You can have different exercises for the home, and you can have different exercises for the therapy. Always remember key principle of home exercise. Do not give home exercises more than 2. A person can do only 2 or maximum 3 exercises at the home. So give 1 or 2 exercises, more repetition is the key for home exercise program.
Okay, sir. Next question is, would dual tasking in gait be a part of neuroplasticity technique?
The answer is yes, but depends what dual tasking you are causing. A dual tasking can enhance the performance as well as decrease the performance. If the dual plasticity is causing more stress, and he is getting negative feedback, and he is failing during the task, it will cause poor neuroplasticity. But if the dual tasking is helping him, it is causing what you say motivation in him, and it is becoming more challenging and novel task, it will help. The key in this designing is that you are using dual task or not. You give a dual task and find at the end of the session, is he able to win in that task? If he is able to win in that task or complete the task what is desired from the person, it will cause positive neuroplasticity. And if he fails in the task due to your dual task training, it will cause negative neuroplastic changes, because it will cause a depression or more stress, and he will think it is not working, and it will have a negative effect. So when we'll talk about the next lecture, we'll talk about knowledge of result more frequently, and this will help you to answer your today's question, that dual tasking helping or not helping. Dual tasking helps, depends how do you use it.
Okay, sir. I think we are finished with the questions. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? So we are done with the questions in the live chat.
So,
can
we'll finish. Yes, Mansa.
Yes, sir. We can conclude the session today.
So, can you help me summarizing the total session so that they will get a feedback of today's session?
Yes, sir. Today's session was really great and very informative, lot of content and lot of there was a big perspective change. So many factors affecting neuroplasticity, not just physical factors which are present on our body, but our emotion, our mood, our sleep, our medications, our environment, everything. So every single thing affects the plasticity, and it can affect it either in a good way or a bad way. Like you said, there can be positive effects on the plasticity or negative effects on the plasticity. So we as therapists, I think, should take these factors into consideration and really, prioritize what we want, what we can constrain and what we can immerse. That concept which you said, I really liked it a lot, that everything that will strengthen the synapses, we should immerse in that completely, and we should constrain the activities that would weaken the synapses. So I really enjoyed your lecture today, sir, and it was very informative and very good interactive session.
Thank you. Hi,
Thank you.
everyone. If you like our session, if you like our lecture, and if you want us to keep continuing this kind of lecture, please do subscribe to our channel and press on the bell button so that you will get notification. By default, every Thursday, 9:30 is our neuro rehab lecture. If you also want to learn about gait and biomechanics, every Saturday, 9:30 is YouTube live session about gait and biomechanics. And if you want to learn about business management and practicing physiotherapy, then you can tune on to every Tuesday at 9:30 for the business management lecture. So this is the end of the session. Thank you very much for joining.